Oh man, I see. Yes, Snake has arrived.
Yeah. Yeah, I see he's in here. What's up, Snake?
Hey guys, sorry, I think my headphones are glitching out for a second. I don't want you guys to have an echo.
I'm not hearing an echo.
Yeah, you're good on my end.
Okay.
Anybody else having a problem?
All right, that should work then.
Right on. Well, man, I'll let you guys get to it. Good luck to both of you. Hope you have a great conversation, and everybody enjoy.
All right, brother. I appreciate it.
No problem. Bye.
All right, everybody. So I'll introduce Snake. Snake is right. He's got a channel as well. If you guys from the atheist community want to check his stuff out, please check him out. You should be able. Do you want to leave a comment or something, Snake, for people to be able to get in contact with you?
Sure.
Okay, perfect. So our topic tonight, which we agreed upon, is going to be is God evil? So, and like we discussed, we can go into our morality as well. I really want to try and stay on topic. As my guest, I'm going to say, go ahead and go first.
All right. Which channel are we on right now?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, sorry. My camcorder mic went out on me.
Oh, sorry. I was just asking which channel this is broadcasting on, so I can do the comment.
Oh yeah, it's dealing with conflict. You're on my channel, right?
Okay.
I'll
find that. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard me, but yeah, as my guest, I'm going to go ahead and let you go first, and I'll even be generous and let you have the last word in this too.
All right. So I guess we would need to start out, if we're going to say God is evil or God is good, we have to define what good and evil are. And basically, to try and sum it up as quickly as possible, I think we're probably going to disagree on what good and evil means, but hopefully we don't have to at that point. Basically, evil is what is bad, and what is bad is basically something that doesn't make sense. It's contradictory. It's illogical, and thus modes of behavior that are illogical and contradictory are bad. And I guess depending on the severity, you could call it evil, or you could just call it all evil and say there are small evils and there are large evils, and maybe there are necessary evils. And what's good is basically just what makes sense and what is consistent, what is logical, and logical methods of behaving. I pretty much arrived at this thinking about what a god would actually be basing its moral code on. And I don't think any god could possibly at least justify just saying, because I say so, because I demand it, it is good. And that would be a logical fallacy, relying on either power, might makes right, or authority, which are both logical fallacies. So if a god is correct about his moral code, he has to have some sort of justification, some sort of rationality or reasoning behind why he is correct. And so I don't think that the God of the Bible adheres to rationality in basically any sense. We can go into the specific examples of why. I usually start with slavery and God's calls for genocide and genital mutilation and things like that. So I guess that'll stand as my opening statement.
Okay, yeah, perfect. So yeah, when you were talking about justifying, so in my opening, I'm just going to go ahead and say that from a perspective of us looking at the Bible, It's not so much just because God says something. It's because he shows us through the Bible. He shows his actions, and even in the story of Job, you can kind of see that uh, things happen um, from his will, right? So it's not for us to question per se in his experiences, because I mean we're only here for a short time. There's so much that you can learn. I mean, you're good in evolution and all these other things, but how good are you at baking a cake? You know, there's just so many different things to learn and to actually understand, not just learn, but understand. And we're talking about a God that created everything, you know, created logic, created the world, created all these things. So when you look at it from this view, it's not just um, because he says something. It's because he he's already thought these things through. You know, he's already thought everything through. He's already done these things. He knows what is right, and that's going to sum me up.
So I have to object to that, because if it's not for us to question, then we have no reason or ability to even judge him correct or competent or good at all. We can't. We have to. So I think what you're arguing is that we just have to assume that he's correct and he knows what he's doing, but we can't know that unless we're able to judge him.
So I'm not saying we can't um, question God, and it even says that in Job. You know, uh, God is actually upset with the people talking to Job and lets them know that Job came the right way in questioning. So it's not that we can't question God, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So, I mean, you could think of it like questioning your parents, right? So um, maybe you said something and you don't know that you did something, you know, wrong per se, but clearly it's wrong, and your parents punish you for it. Now, there's a correct way to ask them. You know, I feel like you're, you know, you're wrong in this, or you could act like a, you know, a spoiled child or something like that, and totally come the wrong way, and you know that's not going to get you any answers. You know, I know if my daughter were to scream at me because I punished her, you know, without having the understanding, uh, the better she comes off to me, the better response she's going to get. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but parents aren't correct by default. A parent can make errors, and a child is free to point them out. I see a lot of bad parenting out there, and especially when parents use the excuse "because I said so," and you should be able to. The parent should be able to justify reasonably their actions, and even if the child is maybe not old enough to understand, that rational justification still needs to be there.
But wouldn't you agree the rational justification is there? And just like you said, um, the child may not understand. So trying to have an adult conversation with a child, they're just not going to comprehend it. And you could compare that to God as well. You know, when he was, again, I'll bring up Job. You know, he lectures Job for like a chapter and a half or so about, you know, all these things that that God knows and did, and you know, you know, asking Job, were you there when I laid the foundation? You know, were you here doing this and this and that? So it becomes this point where God can only God can only explain so much to us because we have a certain capacity. You know, that'd be like us trying, or it'd be like God trying to explain a fourth dimension. You know, on us in a third dimension. How could God explain that fourth dimension to us? It just wouldn't make sense.
Well, perhaps not the best analogy, because we can explain a fourth dimension. It's basically just time. But I kind of see what you're saying. But again, the rational justification is not necessarily there just because they're a parent or a heavenly father. And we as humans are capable of rationality. We're not children. So we are capable of analyzing these things. And since God won't show up himself and can't speak for himself, we're only hearing all these things through third parties. And so we have to be able to weigh the rationality of this advice, or else we have no justification to even follow it in the first place. So we need to be able to rule it out or rule it in. And either way, we have to be able to judge the rationality of it.
Well, I understand what you're saying here, but you're kind of precluding before you know the answer, though, right? I mean, you're saying God can't do this and can't do that. Here's an example. So, imagine you demanding the president of the United States to come to your doorstep and explain something to you personally. Would you expect the president of the United States to travel all the way to your house and talk to you about something that's already been explained?
If he wanted a personal relationship with me, yes. And if he had the power of a god, yes, absolutely. I would expect him to do that.
But don't you understand that you're putting a stipulation on God? God's not putting a stipulation on you. You're saying if he doesn't do this specific thing, then he doesn't exist. Well, that's not, that to me, that would not follow a logical conclusion. Just because someone doesn't do something that you want doesn't mean that he doesn't exist.
Well, I'm not saying that he doesn't exist. I was saying that all we know about him is through third parties. He's not speaking for himself. If he's speaking at all, he's speaking to people who are then speaking to us. So, to go back a little bit, we do know that God can't do certain things. Like God can't contradict himself and be correct at the same time. So if he is caught in a contradiction, we know that this is not a good moral choice.
Can you elaborate more on that? Because honestly, why would he contradict himself?
Theoretically, he shouldn't, but in the Bible, he does.
Okay, I think we're going off topic now, into contradictions, but go ahead and elaborate on that. And as far as contradictions, I just did a video on this. There's so many contradictions, and to me, there's a lot of play on words. And after you go there, I do want to point out what Tiberius is saying here. He says this argument implies an incredible lack of understanding of both children and humans. So go ahead and elaborate on your contradiction.
Well, there are certain things we can know, again, like that a contradiction cannot be correct. And so when God says that slavery is okay, then that's a contradiction, because slavery is always a contradiction. There's no way to not contradict yourself when you're saying that slavery is okay.
Can you show me that verse in the Bible where it says God says slavery is okay?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of different verses. This one is from Leviticus. So Leviticus 25:46, you may keep them as possession for your children after you. You may inherit them as property. These you may treat as slaves. But as for your fellow Israelites, no one shall rule over the other with harshness. So this is talking about taking foreign peoples as slaves.
Okay.
And this is the Lord speaking to Moses. So this is God directly saying that you can take slaves.
Okay. But where does it say God says it's okay? I'm still waiting for that part of it.
You may keep them as a possession. This is God telling Moses he can do this. So that's what saying it's okay is.
No, that's your interpretation of it.
That's literally what it means in the English language. You may do this means I'm saying it's okay. You're permitted to do this.
No, I would definitely disagree.
Well, then
You
you're
may.
wrong.
Okay, well, give me 1 second. Can you hear me?
This is English.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to disagree with you because I could say you may go jump in front of a bus. That doesn't mean it's okay. And it doesn't mean you're going to do it. And it doesn't mean that everyone that was living owned slaves. And also, I just want to point out that in the term slave is so much different then as what you would consider now. You know, you're going into Leviticus and
So the
you're talking
translation is
about.
wrong.
Hold on 1 second. Let me finish. I won't interrupt you, okay? But you're talking about a different kind of slavery. You know, in the Bible, there's guidelines. You know, just like when the people wanted a king, God was telling them, you know, he's not controlling us. He's not making us not do something, right? I mean, I can sin freely at any point. It doesn't mean that it's okay, but if things are going to happen, there's got to be guidelines set, right? He's giving the Hebrews rules to abide by, you know, and you know you're kind of cherry picking in what you're trying to say that it's okay, but you're also forgetting that well before that, God's talking to them about to remember that they were once slaves in Egypt and to treat these people with respect. You know, treat them not like they were treated. So these
So
laws and everything were put in place to protect individuals because in God's eyes, there may be a hierarchy, but in God's eyes, we're all His creation. He loves every single one of us. He loves you. He loves me. It doesn't matter who's our enemy. He loves everyone. No one deserves to be treated poorly because they're in a certain position.
So it's okay to beat someone that's treating them correctly? Because God says you can beat your slaves.
Again, you're not reading it right. Please show me the verse.
This is from the King James Version. Anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result. But if they are not to be punished, if the slave recovers after a day or two, since the slave is their property. So this is saying that slaves are your property. It's using the word slave, so you have to argue that the translation is wrong, and it is describing a person as property, so the word slave is very appropriate, and it's saying that you're allowed to beat them as long as they don't die in a couple of days. That is mistreating someone, and just by owning them as property, and it is mistreating them by beating them severely. You can beat someone extremely severely, and they won't necessarily die in 2 days.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Is that the only verse you know?
And
Oh, sorry, I didn't know you weren't done. Go ahead.
sorry. And I lost my train of thought a little bit. And they do make distinction between slaves and servants. So this, I don't see how you can argue that these are not slaves. They're saying you can inherit their children as possessions as well. So when you say, and God, he says plenty of things. You may not do this. This is forbidden. X is forbidden. You can't. Eating shellfish shall be an abomination to you. And yet he has nothing bad to say about slavery. He says you may keep them as possessions. So I don't understand any of your arguments so far.
Are you done?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to say clearly that I didn't say the word slave is inappropriate. So please understand what I'm saying. I'm saying that slavery back then is nothing compared to what we would consider from the Americas. You know, tell me what slave in the Americas had any kind of rights.
Slaves had rights.
They did.
And slavery, why are you just limiting this to America? Slavery has been something throughout all cultures.
I was giving one example.
I'm not comparing this to American slavery. I'm comparing it to like European slavery, like Greek slavery, Roman slavery. That was all immoral just as well. Would you agree?
Even in the Greek terms, they did have rights. That's what I'm trying to get at. So when people are viewing this,
have rights. It doesn't matter if they have
I think it does matter.
No, it doesn't.
Again, when you think about the Americas, hold on. Hold on a second. I wasn't interrupting you.
You interrupted. Yes, you did. You interrupted me. So you don't need rights. You need equal rights. So it doesn't matter if you give them a pittance of rights. You need equal rights. All people have equal rights. Therefore, the contradiction. Go ahead.
Okay, real quick. I'm going to let you talk, but if I start talking when I've given you plenty of time, please don't interrupt me. I'll just
you interrupted me, so
okay.
That's why I continued.
Well, I've been trying to talk, and you keep interrupting me.
You interrupted me just there.
I'm not going to argue with you anymore. Now listen, what I'm trying to tell you is that slavery. Stop interrupting me. That slavery is not in the Bible is not the same as what we would consider in the Americas. There were guidelines. I'm not sitting here saying that slavery is good. Neither was God. Again, you can't show me in the Bible where it says God said you need to have slaves, you should have slaves, this, and that. God set guidelines for what mankind did. Mankind did all these things. God didn't make us do anything. God doesn't make you get in your car. God doesn't make you brush your teeth. God doesn't interfere with what you're doing. There's a big difference there. And again, you can misunderstand it if you want, but it's not a contradiction to say that there's because something's happening, that instead of God just wiping the earth out again or something like that, saying, okay, if you guys are going to go down this route, here's some laws that you're going to have to abide by. You brought up the hitting a slave. It doesn't say God said it's okay to hit your slaves. I would really like to know if you actually only know that verse or you read the entire thing, because there's plenty of other laws in there. So you're taking the context out when you're just saying, oh, well, God said this, God said that. No, you're not listening or even trying to understand it, because the entire thing is laws and rules. If you do own a slave, how to treat these people. And again, it's to treat them with respect and not treat them bad. It talks about just before that, if a man beats another man and he dies, then that person is going to be would be killed as well. So it's actually on the same level. It's saying that, hey, just because you're a slave owner, just because this person is yours, doesn't mean that you can treat them like crap. You can still be held accountable. He's not just a piece of meat. He's a human being that deserves respect. Now, does that make sense to you?
Oh, because it says he's literally a piece of property. Owning a slave is not acceptable under any circumstances, period. And no, I'm not taking the context out. I read the entire Bible cover to cover. I studied this academically. I passed tests on it. Reading the Bible is what convinced me that Christianity is false, and I went and read the Bible because I was hoping it was true. Then I saw the atrocities in it in its full context from beginning to end. And I really don't care that there are guidelines to slavery. The problem is the slavery at all. It doesn't matter how brutal the slavery is or how regulated the slavery is. Slavery should be banned. Full stop, period. And again, I never said God said you have to have slaves. I said God allows slavery, and allowing slavery is evil. If our government allowed slavery, that would be evil. Not banning slavery is evil. God does not put a ban on slavery. He instead says it's okay. So owning a slave in any capacity, no matter if, you can't beat him that hard. He's you can own him as property, but you can't beat him that hard. That's still slavery, and that's still wrong. Period. And God allows it. Any good God would ban that. Would you agree that owning a slave at all is wrong?
Yes, I wouldn't own slaves. I've never owned a slave.
So why does God say it's okay to do so?
Like-
Why wouldn't God say that it's not okay under any circumstances?
Again, please show me where it says God says this is okay.
I already did.
You're taking this the wrong way. You're not looking at it.
That's a terrible.
God doesn't prevent murderers. God doesn't prevent a rapist. There's
He says, "You shall
laws.
not."
Exactly. There's laws against these of
Right.
certain things.
But
Now-
he doesn't. There's no law against slavery. There's just laws against like super ultra mega evil brutal slavery. But all other forms of slavery are fine.
No, see, and that would be your view of it. That's
No,
You know,
that is
you're-
what the text says.
okay.
Would you like me to read it again?
Please read it again and tell me where it says God says this is okay for you to do.
This is Leviticus 25, God speaking to Moses. You may keep them as a possession for your children after you. You may inherit them as your property. These you may treat as slaves. And he's distinguishing here, but as for your fellow Israelites, he's talking about Israelite servants, no one shall rule over the other with harshness. So he's only saying you can't be harsh to the Israelite servants. He says nothing about not being harsh against the foreign slaves. He says you can keep them as slaves. A good God would say slavery is wrong, period, in all contexts.
That's your opinion. You don't get to choose and pick what God does. Yeah, that's like
I do, actually.
well, yeah, you can, but it doesn't make it correct though, Snake.
Actually,
I'm just trying to say that you're sitting here talking about one verse. Read before that, Snake. Go ahead and keep reading above. Start from the very beginning. And realize the context isn't about God saying that, yeah, let's go ahead and do this. It's okay for you to, again, it's not God saying these things are okay. God is saying, if you're going to do this, then you're going to have some rules. Because again, this is well before this in Leviticus. Again, God tells the Hebrews to not forget that they were slaves in Egypt and they should treat people correctly.
Yeah, here's the context. He's talking about Jewish dependents who sell themselves as servants. You shall not make them slaves. They shall remain with you as hired or bound laborers. They shall serve unto the year of Jubilee. And they and their children shall be free from your authority. For they are my servants. I brought you out of the land of Egypt. They shall not be sold as slaves. You shall not rule over them with harshness. As for the male and female slaves whom you have, it is from the nations around you that you may acquire male and female slaves. So he's saying you can't do this to the Jews, but you can do this to other people. You may acquire them from among aliens residing within you. So you can even just pick someone out of your neighborhood just because they're a different race than you, and from the families that are with you who have been born in your land, and they may be your property. And that's the context of what I just read before. Leviticus 25:46. So the context isn't changing at all. And I guess I don't pick and choose what is good and what is not. Logic determines that. So if God is contradicting himself and giving people unequal rights, that's a contradiction. I didn't pick that. That's just a contradiction inherently.
Snake, you're trying to say that God is picking what's unequal rights for people. That's just not, like I said, there's hierarchies. Think about your job. We could consider ourselves slaves today. The only people that would be truly free is anyone that doesn't have to rely on somebody else. So if you could live off the land, then you would be considered free.
Is that the context though? Are you a communist now? Are you saying that we're all wage slaves? Because I'm not. I'm a capitalist. I think that you can make a consensual agreement to trade your labor for money. And that is not what the context of this passage is. This
That's
passage
perfect.
is saying that you own another person as property. It is not a consensual agreement. Employees are not property. You cannot beat your employees. And I saw SFT in the chat saying, yeah, I deserve a beating if I don't work. No, you deserve to be fired. That's the difference. A slave who is property and an employee who has come to work with you consensually.
Yeah, and you're trying to take it out of what I'm trying to say, Snake. What I'm trying to say is that you can consider everything. A slave back then would do the same thing. They're trading their labor for protection. You're making it sound like all days it's chains and whips for them. You know, and again, that's not what this is about.
That's not what I said at all.
That's not what God was meaning by putting these laws into place.
Did I say that? I said they're treated as property. It doesn't matter how well you treat your slave. Them being your property, that's the problem. And no, it makes a very clear distinction between someone who is selling themselves into debt and someone who is an actual slave who is property. Should I read it again?
Please do.
If any who are dependent on you become so impoverished that they sell themselves to you, you shall not make them serve as slaves. Yet later on, that was line 39, and at line 44, it talks about male and female slaves that you do have coming from the nations around you. So it's very clear that it's distinguishing between servants and slaves. You can have Jewish servants who you should not treat harshly, and you can have slaves whom you can beat and treat as property. It's very clear text. This is why I love it, that it's written down.
Again, Snake, you're not understanding the point of the laws. The laws were put in place to protect the people. The laws aren't in place to say that they can just do this. Again, God doesn't prevent us from doing anything. God doesn't prevent a murderer from murdering. God doesn't prevent a rapist from raping. There's rules and guidelines. Well, yeah, that's my point, Snake.
But he doesn't say you should not own slaves. He just says you shouldn't beat them until they die within 2 days. But you can beat them if they die within 3 days. And you can treat them as property.
Okay.
God doesn't say you shall not treat people as property, as he should if he's being a consistent, logical, moral being.
No, and again, that's subjective. That's your subjective view.
No, it's not. It is objective. Double standards are objectively false contradictions.
No, what you're saying is he has to be this way or nothing.
No, I'm saying he cannot be this way because he's doing a contradiction. He cannot contradict himself and be correct. If he contradicts himself, he is incorrect. So he can't do that.
So explain the contradiction.
Double standards are an inherent contradiction. Unequal rights are an inherent contradiction. Saying, laws for me, I get to not be a slave, but you can be a slave. That is a contradiction. Rules for me, but not for thee.
That makes no sense.
That's why we have.
You could be the president of the United States, Snake, or you could be a homeless person.
Yeah, and they deserve to be prosecuted under the same law, and they deserve all of the same rights, free speech through the whole thing. Equal rights. All people deserve equal rights. Period. Anything else than that is contradiction.
And that's what God was giving them, is equal rights. Do you not understand what you're saying?
No,
the laws were put in. Hold on, Snake. Hold on. The laws were put in place to treat these people as equals, not as just some piece of meat. I can't understand how you're not getting that. You're trying to put a double standard on God. You're trying to say that, because someone's a slave, that means they're not being treated equally. Well, you could say the same thing again about a homeless person. I don't see you sitting here getting upset because God made someone a homeless person. And yes, everyone I see in the chat, you guys are talking about debt. That I think that's neither here nor there of what we're actually trying to get on. But
Actually, it does. It distinguishes between the debt, the Israelite debtor servants who become servants because of debt, who are dependent on you, and it distinguishes between them and slaves from the tribes around you. So, no, stop conflating those. And treating someone as a slave is not treating them as equals. Just because you give them some protections does not mean that you're giving them all the protections that everyone else has. Like the Israelites. The Israelites had protections not to be slaves, but the non-Israelites did not have those protections. The only protections they had was you can't beat them so badly that they die within 2 days.
Again, you're going to something and making it sound like God's telling everyone to beat their slaves.
No, that's not my argument at all.
Okay, then rephrase it, because that's how it sounds.
Well, then you're
You're
not
making
listening.
it. Well,
I'm
am
saying
listening.
that God allows it. He's not saying beat them. He's saying you can beat them if you want. There's a difference between permitting something and commanding something. Do you understand that?
I do understand, Snake, but I think what you're not understanding is you keep saying he is saying to do this. Please, again,
That's
read
not what
the
I'm
verse
saying. I
again.
keep telling you that's not what I'm saying.
But you just said it.
No, I didn't. I said he allows it. He permits it. He does not command it. He permits it.
And again, he allows murder. He allows rape. He allows all these different things.
He says he commands you not to do that. He bans
Whether
murder.
you do it or not.
He bans rape. He should ban slavery. There should be a commandment that says thou shalt not hold someone as property. Yet he doesn't do that. He says thou can hold someone as property if you want.
No, I think you're just misunderstanding it.
That's what it says. That's what the book says. I can read.
Okay, read it one more time.
You're trying to spin all these wheels like
it's not a spin to say that
you're straw manning me saying that I am saying this is a commandment. It's not a commandment. He's just allowing it.
No, I'm saying that God put laws in place to protect people. And you're trying to say that God allows it or he condones it.
He does.
Please show me where it says he condones it.
He does allow and condone it. And he's giving unequal protections. He's giving a pittance of protections to the slaves, and he's giving more protections to the Israelites. So that's the difference.
No, and just like they keep saying in the chat, they're talking about a debt. You know,
how many times have I gone over this? It's very specific. It talks about Israelites who are servants who owe a debt. Then it talks about foreigners whom you can own as property. There are two different subjects. Stop conflating them. They are not the same thing. Israelite debtors are not the same as foreigner slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And the text makes this very clear.
Okay.
And this chapter, Leviticus, starts off as the Lord spoke to Moses. And this is telling Moses what you can do with your slaves, what he's going to allow you to do with your slaves, what he's not going to allow you to do with your slaves. So he's not going to allow you to beat your slave if he dies within 2 days, but he's going to allow you to beat your slave if he dies within 3 or 4 days. And he's going to allow you to treat them as property. And he's going to allow you to inherit their children. So that's another argument against the debtor thing. The children are born into debt. That's utter nonsense. Children are not property, and they are not born into debt.
Well, again, obviously they were property back then.
Yeah, and that's wrong.
Okay.
I'm saying they shouldn't be.
No one here is saying that slavery is a good thing.
Except for God.
But again, I don't see how you're making the leap from God saying that or condoning something. He doesn't make us do anything. But he gave guidelines to not do these things. It's like our laws today, Snake. You could sit here and argue that the United States condones something because, you know, instead of someone getting beat up, they could just go to jail. Well, if they die or you know, even threaten someone, they're not held to the same standard. You can't put blame on God for something that those people did.
I can when God says you're allowed to do it. So if the United States laws allowed slavery and did not ban slavery, would you say that we had equal rights, would you say that that's a good thing if we didn't have a ban on slavery in the United States?
Well, number one, we did have slavery at one time, didn't we?
Yeah, and then we banned it.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, so you're going to answer the question? Is it
Yes.
good? Is it better that we banned slavery, or is it better that we allow slavery?
Obviously, it's better.
To?
You're okay, but you're not thinking
Better to what?
in the terms back then either. God says, even divorce was allowed. It's not that it's good to get divorced, Snake, but he allowed it because people's hearts were hardened back then. This was a different time, and clearly, even 100 or 200 years ago, it was a different time.
So when's he going to update it? When's he going to say that slavery is wrong?
When's he going to update it?
So you didn't answer the question.
It's not a computer program, Snake.
It
All
should
the
be.
laws and everything are already in there.
Because apparently the laws are tailored for ancient barbarians. So when's the update?
Okay.
We need an update for modern times.
Stealing. What about stealing?
Slavery is essentially theft.
Stealing. Is it still wrong?
You're stealing the labor of your slave.
How about adultery? Is that still wrong?
I don't know.
How about lying? Is that still wrong?
No.
No?
Lying is perfectly justified under certain circumstances. If an axe murderer shows up at your door looking for your sister, you're perfectly justified to lie to that man. You're perfectly justified to lie.
Okay. I love how you give these really weird or just extreme cases.
And you're a spy.
Hello? Are you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
You cut out.
Yeah. I was saying that there are certain circumstances where you can lie. I don't know if you heard the part about the axe murderer. If an axe murderer shows up at your door looking for your friend, you're allowed to lie to that person. That's perfectly justified. He has no right to know the truth.
Okay, well, again, God sets the standard for it. You can justify anything you want. You could look back at Abraham. Abraham lied and told everyone that wasn't his wife because he feared dying. Just because he did that and he justified it to himself didn't make it right. You're not looking at it right.
If God's standard is contradictory, then God is wrong.
I'm sorry?
Simple. If God's standard is contradictory, it is wrong.
Okay, you've got to show the contradiction. You can't just say something's a contradiction and not show it.
I already have.
No, you haven't. You keep saying that God allows it, but you're not showing it. You've read, how many times have you read that? And all you do is instead of actually reading what it says, just jump to your own conclusion.
I have read it verbatim what it says.
And tell me in there verbatim where it says, God, I am the Almighty God and I allow this. I want you to have slaves and I condone this action. Please show me in the Bible where it says that, Snake.
The Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai. That's how the chapter begins. He says, you may keep them as possession for your children and inherit them as property.
Mm-hmm.
It's right there. So
okay,
you kind of dodged my question earlier.
Hold on. Now, where's the condoning? Where did God say that this is right or that anything like that? Just because, again, I could bring up you may. Well, Snake, you may run into traffic.
Condone means accept and allow.
Again, we just keep going in circles because you keep bringing up allow. And again, God allows rapists. God allows all these other things.
No, he doesn't.
It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it right.
He bans them.
No, it doesn't make it right.
He said, listen, if God doesn't want something to happen, he says, thou shalt not do this. He doesn't do that with slavery.
Exactly. He tells them not to do these things.
He tells them not to do super brutal slavery, but you can do slightly less brutal.
He tells them not to do super duper.
Yeah, he tells them that you can have slightly less brutal slavery.
So
he has a standard by which, that's too brutal. But he doesn't say that slavery itself is wrong, which it is, which you seem to agree to, but you're kind of dodging the question. When I asked you whether it's better that the United States bans slavery or allows slavery, you said, of course it's better. And you never answered which one is better. So which one is better, allowing slavery or banning slavery?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I did answer that. Yeah, banning slavery. Obviously, it's better.
Yeah, so why doesn't God do that?
Because
If
God
he
doesn't do
bans,
that.
yes, he does.
Human beings decide what we do, Snake.
What are the 10 commandments?
What about the 10 Commandments?
What are they? Can you name a couple
Thou
of them?
shalt not lie. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not have any other gods before me.
Mhm.
Thou shalt not commit adultery.
So God does, in fact, do what you just said God doesn't do. He says you
No,
cannot do
he's
some
telling you.
things.
You're conflating this. You're making it out to be something it's not, Snake.
God has a
I
standard.
don't understand how
you.
I don't understand how you're going from the fact that he's here saying you can't do these things, but you're saying that he's condoning these things.
I'm saying
You're taking the situation.
He condemns killing, even though he orders Israelites to kill people. We can get to that later, including children. He condemns killing, adultery, etc., etc. He does not condemn slavery. He only condemns a certain act in slavery, but he does not condemn slavery. He condones slavery. He allows it and accepts it under certain conditions.
I guess we're just not going to agree on that. I mean, again, and
yeah,
unless you can tell me verbatim where it says, I the Lord God want you to have slaves.
Again, that's a straw man.
You can take the words however you want to, Snake.
I never said God commands slavery. I never said that.
Okay, I know you're trying to say God condones it.
Mm-hmm.
God's not condoning anything. God's not condoning anyone to be mistreated.
Apparently, his standard for mistreating is if you die within 2 days of a beating. So if you die within 3 days of a beating, that's not mistreatment according to God. So God's wrong.
You're taking it the wrong way.
I'm taking it how it's written.
No, you're reading it, and again, you're not taking it as a law to protect people. You're taking it as, oh, well, if they died after the third day, it's okay. No, that's not what it's about. The law was put in place to protect the people.
To barely protect them. They need more protection.
How does that barely protect them?
Standard.
A slave could run to another master if they're mistreated. I don't understand how you're just going off this one verse and making it sound like God's like, yeah, it's okay if he dies on the third day. No,
that's what it says.
The laws are, well, of course, that's what it says.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously there was a circumstance in it, right?
Yeah. So
now, what about a free man to a free man? Do you think it'd be the same?
No, it's not the same. It's a double standard.
No, because if you read just above that, it goes over the same thing, Snake. It talks about if you struck somebody and they die, then you will be put to death. So it's not a double standard.
It doesn't say you can treat a free man as property, though, does it?
What does that have to do with anything?
That's what slavery is.
Again, God doesn't control what we do, Snake. I don't think you're getting that point. God doesn't control what we do. Human beings did these things. The world did these things, Snake.
He condemns certain
God
things.
didn't do these things. We did. We're humans. The fact that we rose above slavery is amazing. Especially in this
despite the Bible, which condones slavery.
I'm sorry?
We rose above slavery despite the Bible.
Despite the Bible? What are you talking about?
The Bible never explicitly condemns slavery, nor does God. Yet our modern governments are apparently wiser than the Bible for banning slavery. You said that was better.
That makes no sense what you just said.
Yeah, it actually does, which is why you can't actually unpack why it doesn't make sense.
Okay, no. Explain how we didn't use the Bible to get rid of slavery. How do you know that for sure, Snake?
Because the Bible explicitly says slavery is allowed. It explicitly condones slavery. There's
no, that's what you wanted to say.
Jesus himself says, slaves, obey your masters.
Yeah, it does. It says obey your masters.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like everyone else is saying, they had a debt, or they
Again,
needed
that's a
protection.
clearly established lie.
Okay, you can no look, Snake. You can sit here and talk to your blue in the face about what you're supposed to do, but if I go to my workplace right now, I need to respect my boss, don't I?
You are not your boss's property, and your boss cannot beat you.
Well, he
And
could.
your boss, and your boss,
He very well could.
and your boss cannot own your children as property. He could, but guess what? It is condemned by the laws.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so
So
you're
it's
not understanding.
condemned.
So, right, I agree with you that God allows us free will, but
Okay,
he condemns certain
now we're getting
things.
somewhere.
He condemns certain things, and he condones certain things, and he commands certain things. He does not condemn slavery.
But it doesn't mean he condones it either.
It does.
Just
Unless you condemn it, you
Snake,
condone it. It's a
Snake.
dichotomy.
Again, he allowed divorce. It doesn't mean he condones it.
He allows everything in the sense that he
Thank you.
allows us free will, but he condemns certain things like murder. He does not condemn slavery. He should condemn slavery.
Why?
That's
Why
what I'm
does it?
saying.
Okay, let's unpack that real quick. Uh, why does he not want us to kill someone?
Because that's a hypocritical act. Well, I assume
No,
if God is correct about it, but he does want us to kill people often in the Bible.
no, he doesn't. But anyway,
He does. He commands us to wipe out the entire Amalekites, man, woman, and child.
yes. Are we going to switch topics now,
So why
or do
would
you want to
you
stay
just
on?
lie and say he doesn't command us to kill people when you just agreed that he commanded the Israelites to kill the Amalekites?
Because you're going in a different direction there.
It's not a
There's a
different direction. I'm showing you the difference between a
no.
commandment and
Again, Snake.
God's contradictory actions of saying,
Snake,
"Don't
are you
do
going to let
this,
me
do this."
explain? Are you going to just keep interrupting me, or are you going to let me explain?
Well, you were
Okay.
interrupting me while I was trying to explain. So I am done now.
Well, thank you for that.
If you heard
So,
anything while you
okay,
were
I thought
trying
you
to
were
interrupt.
done. Are you done? Okay. So, I'm not saying that God didn't command them to do that. That's not what I'm saying. There's a difference though when just like when God wiped out the earth. God has that right. He had every justification. What's it say why he did it, Snake? Do you know?
You cut out there. All I heard was why he did it.
Why did God wipe out the earth on the flood? Why did he do that?
I don't know. There's no reason. He could have just snapped his fingers and had everything the way he wanted.
But he gives a reason, doesn't he? What was the reason?
It's not a good reason.
It's not a good reason.
There was sin in the world, so he wiped everyone out.
Okay, no, that's not what it was.
You're talking about the flood?
Yes, I'm talking about the flood. What does it say?
Do you have a passage or something? Because as far as I'm aware, he wiped out the sinners and saved Noah because the
Okay.
world was overrun with sinners.
It's not that it was overwhelmed with just sinners. He could hear everyone's thoughts and everything was pure evil. He was upset that he even created us.
So exactly what I said.
No. God wiped everyone out, Snake, because they stayed with their flesh and they weren't trying to praise God anymore. They weren't trying to be better people. They just wanted to live in their sins. That's not why God created us. God created us to be happy, to love one another, to take care of one another. Does that make sense? Hello? Are you there? Can anyone hear me? Can someone put a comment in, please? All right, I guess I don't know if he's coming back or what. I don't know exactly what happened. Gosh. Yes, Eddie, this is live. Rush hour, and I'll go ahead and answer this question while we wait for Snake. If he is coming back, I'm not sure. Rush hour said, if God was truly all good, then why doesn't he just give all his creation eternal happiness to begin with? There he is. Snake's back. Hold on one second. Why do you have to even create the concepts of evil and suffering? Now, this is a very, it would take more than just a couple minutes to explain this, Rush hour, but basically, when you really think about it, if you were to create something, would you want a robot or something that freely loved? So if you had the choice of creating something, say like your children, I know personally when my children come up and they tell me they love me, I know it's not because I've got a pre-programmed button I can hit on my daughter and make her say I love you. That's not what God would want. God created this for us to have free will to freely love him. So I know that's probably not the whole answer you wanted, and I can go into more detail into that, Rush hour, afterwards if you want. But yes, in my opinion, it's because we're not robots. God doesn't want a robot. God wants us to freely love him. God wants us to not be robots. Again, do you want to hear a recording, I love you, or do you want to hear actual sincere, someone sincerely saying, I love you?
So he
Welcome
just
back,
threatens
Snake.
them. So he just threatens them with eternal torture if they don't love him, and the concept of heaven destroys that entire excuse anyway, because he gets rid of all sin and apparent. Unless you're saying there's free will in heaven, then he can just create heaven on earth right now.
Well, we had to go through the journey to get there, though, didn't we?
Sure. So you're saying everyone who goes to heaven just automatically just gets over their sin as soon as they die?
No, I didn't say that. I think
So
a really good point is.
So how are they in heaven without sin?
I think a really good point is somebody once told me is the Bible is more of a guideline on how we should be acting when we get to heaven. And it's up to us right now to be practicing that, to get ourselves right for when we do get there in front of God, because obviously God can't be around sin. I give an analogy in one of my videos. It's kind of like bleach, and we would be bacteria. You just can't be bacteria around bleach. It won't work. God loved Aaron and Moses. Aaron's sons went in there and they died because they had sinned. You can't sin in the presence of God. So, in my humble opinion, we should be trying to strive to be what God wants us to be now, because I can tell you this, if I don't know who else would be embarrassed or fearful if they were in heaven and decided to do something like that. Now, it also talks about us being transformed. So I don't want to get into all that fully. That's a topic for a different day. But God's given us a choice here, and we can either love Him or reject Him, and that's completely up to us. So, when you're saying that He's he's forcing you to go to hell, that's just incorrect, bud. You know, if you don't want to listen and you know, learn about God, and you just want to reject him, that's completely up to you. No one else is making that choice for you. And you know, I've said this in my videos too. You can't show God by sending yourself to hell. That makes no sense. You know, that's like jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. It's just not going to end well.
If I ended up in hell, then I would believe in a God. And if I stood before God, I would believe in a God. But I don't, so I just go to hell automatically?
I don't pick who goes to hell, Snake, and I'm not going to tell you where you're going to go, period. All I can say is that even myself at one point when I stopped believing in God, had I died then, I don't know where I'd be, Snake. I really don't. And that would be up to God. But, you know, when we have this one life to try and get it right, and we have this one life to show God that we deserve this eternal life. So again, it's, you know, especially in this time and age, it's such a great time of information and whatnot. And if you decide to not look into those things, then you know that's your choice. God's not making that choice for you.
Well, if we have one chance to show we deserve eternal life, why is the only criteria whether we believe in Christianity or not? Shouldn't the criteria be like the content of your character and not what religion you happen to be raised in?
Well, no, because grace is free, right? There's nothing we can do, Snake, that
So he should give it to people who aren't aware that the Bible is true.
well, no, because that's your choice, isn't it?
No, it's
You're
not my choice.
deciding, yes.
No, it's not.
Right
if it
now,
doesn't make
today,
sense, I cannot believe in it.
and that's up to you. That you're
It's not.
deciding.
No.
You, yes, obviously,
Nope.
Snake, because I do believe in God. You
I
are
can't
making
just-
you are
I can't
making the
just-
decision that you don't believe in it, that
Nope.
you don't believe God's right, or
Nope.
that He exists. So
Nope.
that's your choice.
No, it's
Well,
not.
you can say nope all you want, but I think it's fairly obvious that you're making a choice.
I can prove that you're wrong because I cannot force myself to believe something that I don't believe. I cannot force myself to believe that I can fly. I have no choice in the matter. I either have the information that convinces me or I don't. If it were up to me, I would choose to believe that because I want an eternal life and I want there to be a God. But guess what? I'm unconvinced because I don't see any evidence. It's not my fault.
Well,
I can't force myself to believe things.
Thinking like that, Snake, is like saying it's not my fault I was an alcoholic. I had to take responsibility for my actions. If you
No, it's not. Being an alcoholic is not a belief. It's an action. You can choose actions. You can't choose beliefs.
Yes, you can. You can choose to believe or not.
Choose to believe you can fly. You can't do it, can you?
What does that have to do with anything?
I just proved you're wrong. You can't choose your beliefs.
Well, yes, I can.
You have no response.
Well, no, yes.
You're
I
dumbfounded.
could believe I could fly. It doesn't mean that I can fly.
Do it. Do you believe you can fly right now?
No, I don't.
Choose to believe you can fly.
Okay. I can fly.
You believe that?
I do now.
I don't believe you.
Okay. I just don't get what you're getting at because I have the choice, Snake. If I want to believe I can fly, I could get on top of a building and believe it and fall to my death.
Okay.
You have the choice, though.
Go do that. Prove me wrong.
You're oh my God.
You believe
you're making
that
it sound no, you're making it sound like you don't have a choice and you do.
I think you're lying.
You think I'm lying about what?
That you believe that you can fly right now.
Of course I don't believe I can fly.
I know that.
Okay. It doesn't mean That someone can't believe that. I'm sure people have thought they could fly, Snake.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And it wasn't a choice. Something convinced them that they could fly. Something convinced their mind that this was a possibility, and they had no choice in the matter.
And it was probably drugs, to be honest. That was a joke.
That can happen.
It can. I know.
But again, that's something that's altering their brain state, which shows that there is no soul. Because if taking a physical chemical changes the way your soul thinks, that pretty much shows there's no spirit. It shows that it's all physical in the brain, because it's a chemical that's changing your thoughts. And if your soul is you, your thoughts are you. But if your thoughts are being manipulated by chemicals, it's not a disembodied soul. It's something physical in the brain.
So you're saying that they didn't actually believe they could fly?
No.
Okay. But they did believe they could fly. So I think
chemical process altered their brain.
Does that still change whether they believe they can fly or not?
It does. Depending on the physical state of their brain, it changes what they believe in.
But, and in the end, they still believed, right?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So I have to conclude that your point is invalid. I can believe whatever I want to believe in, Snake. You can believe in whatever you want to believe.
No, I can't believe what I want to believe.
Okay. Well, I believe that.
I want to believe several things. I want to believe in a God, but I can't believe in a God. I want to believe that I have $1 million, but I can't believe it. There are plenty of things that I would love to believe, but I can't do that.
You're putting a crutch in there, Snake. You're convincing yourself you can't believe. No. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to you or whatnot. What I'm trying to say is you can. That's like somebody that was told they can never walk again, and then they prove everyone wrong.
There's a difference between belief and
you
trying. I can try to walk again.
Well, they had to have that belief, right? That they could.
No, you don't. You have to believe that you can try.
You just said no, you don't. They have to believe. So, yes, they have to have a belief.
You don't have to believe that you can walk to try to
This
walk.
is a really petty thing. And
I know, and you're losing.
How am I losing? Because you can't understand you have a choice.
I already proved that you don't.
You do. You so have a choice. You can believe if you want, Snake.
Yeah, I'm trying, but I can't do it. And what I just said was, you can try to do something that you don't necessarily believe that you can do. I can try to beat my 1 mile record. Doesn't necessarily believe I'm going to do that, but I can still try. There's a difference there. So I don't know how I can decide to believe in God, and I don't know why I would decide to believe in God. If it's just a decision, there's actually no actual reason to choose that, other than you told me to do it. I don't trust you, though.
I'm not asking you to trust me.
I don't trust the Arab sheep herders who wrote down the Bible either.
The Arab sheep herders. Mm-hmm. I love when people bring that up.
Yeah, because you understand instinctively why the Indian farmers in ancient India, how dumb and silly their gods are. You understand how silly the Muslims are. You understand how silly the ancient pagans up in Germany, the Vikings who worshipped Odin. You understand how those ancient superstitions are silly and based on a lack of understanding of the universe. You understand that for every religion except for your own. That's called special pleading.
No, I'd have to disagree with you fully there. I
know you have to, but...
Well, yeah, I have to, because there's a big difference in all those. You can actually read the Bible, test it. It even tells you to test it to our surroundings, to our universe, and everything comes to be true in it. You could read those other religions and test them, and they'll fail. You know, Ravi Zacharias talked about this. He had a huge, I think it was like an hour or two long over it.
Yeah, I read his book on my channel, front to cover to back, and it was just chock full of awful arguments. Just kind of, I say so. I want to believe, therefore I believe.
Okay.
Just the regular terrible theist arguments that have failed for 2,000 years.
For instance,
well, like I said, he was like dying or something. He was in the hospital.
He
and
did
some
die.
priest. Yeah, but in the book, at the end of Reason, he said that he was in the hospital or something like that, and he was in a very vulnerable position, and a priest came and talked to him, and for some reason he felt inspired. That's not a reason to believe that the priest is right. I mean, it's a whole book. I can go through it and see if he makes.
Okay, I think I lost him again. Can I see the chat's still going? I apologize that he's cutting out again. I know we did get off of topic. Obviously, we've gone way off the topic. Once he gets back in here, I will try and get us back on the topic of evil. I hope you guys do understand what I'm trying to say. He's trying to say that. Oh, there he is. He's trying to say that he can't do something, but again, to me, that's just limiting himself. And I mean, again, like when I was an alcoholic, I could have said I can't stop drinking, but I did, and that actually started from a belief that I could, and that belief actually came from God as well. I know you guys have seen, or hopefully most of you have seen my first episode, but listening to that different song really helped change my life and get me back on track with God. And some of the conversations we've had with Jesse and Jason and Refined and Alex, hopefully you've kind of understood me better, understand why I believe in God. And anyways, we'll get back to it. So Snake, let's hop back on the topic of evil and get away from whatever we're talking about. I can't remember if you wanted to finish whatever your last thought on what you were talking about. Feel free to.
Yeah, I was just trying to sum up some of the arguments from Ravi Zacharias' book, End of Reason. I think the last thing I said is he's basically saying that Christianity is true by default because atheism has no moral values and has no ultimate answers, which is not true. Atheism does have moral values. And
where do they come from, though?
And hold on, I'll get to that. But just even if atheism was not true, that doesn't mean Christianity is true by default. But the moral values of an atheist would come from the exact same principles that any God would use. So you agreed with me that God does not just say, because I said so. Do you agree that he uses some kind of process of reasoning and rationality to come up with or justify his moral framework? Do you agree that God's morals are rationally justified?
That his morals or the morals he gave us?
Well, if there's objective morality, then There's no distinguishing factor. And if it's subjective, then I don't care about it. It's not morality. If it's just subjective, then it's just, hey, Hitler was right because
Oh no, I totally
it
agree.
was his laws. So subjective morality is completely useless. It's not. It's like meaningless.
I was just can you ask it one more time? I'm trying to understand exactly what you're asking me.
Is there some kind of process of rationality or reasoning that God does to arrive at his moral conclusions and positions, or that supports his positions on morality, objective morality?
I mean, I can't go into the mind of God, but in my opinion, um, God created everything. He created logic. He created um, the systems. He created the laws, not just laws for us, but laws of physics, laws of everything. So yeah, everything in this universe speaks out to God. Did that answer your question or no?
Not really. If if he created logic, then couldn't he have made logic differently? Or is there a reason that the law of non-contradiction just works?
I don't know.
Or is it
I
just
know
because
that's a weird
God
question, I
said
guess.
so, therefore it works?
Uh, I don't think that's accurate. I don't think that's how God looks at it. It's not just because he says so, but because he knows so.
Yeah, so there
Again,
must be some kind of rationality behind it.
yes.
So if he doesn't have reasons and rationality behind his positions, then they're not justified.
Okay, you lost me. Come back now.
Basically what
God
I
has
was
reasons for us. God is the way God is because he's all knowing. He knows everything. So of course he would know, you know, anything and everything. So in my personal, I guess I don't know. I'm not trying to dodge your question or anything. I'm just trying to understand it because in my personal opinion, um, I wouldn't I personally wouldn't question God because again, in the Bible it shows that he is all knowledgeable, that he knows all these things. So who would know better, you know, me or God? I I'm not willing to put myself on the same platform as God.
Well, if you're saying that the Bible shows you that he is good, then you have some sort of standard to judge what is good and what is bad, don't you?
Oh, yes. Yes.
So how do you do that? How would a God do that?
How would God show us?
No, how would a God figure out what is good and what is bad? Like
Well,
you say he knows everything. What part of that knowledge lets him know what is good and what is bad? It's the same thing in atheism. It's just logic. This syllogism makes sense. It is consistent. The conclusion is valid. The premises are sound. And if you make a mistake and make it something invalid or unsound, then the conclusion is incorrect. And that's just what morality is. If slavery is wrong because the premises for justifying slavery are invalid or unsound. You can't logically get to slavery without making logical fallacies. Same with murder, same with rape and theft. And so all of these things that we say are bad, they're violating these logical principles. And a God knows that, and a human can know that as well without a God.
well, see, that's where you lost me though, because just like you had already said, um, the reason why we know as Christians what's good and bad is from what God has taught us and what, God gave us our conscience. So I'm sure you can even attest to when you were a child, had you done something wrong, you got that feeling, you got that conscience that was working in you and let you know that was wrong. Yeah, it didn't take a parent telling you, no, that's wrong. You knew that going into that store and taking that piece of candy was wrong, yet you did it anyway. You see what I'm saying? It didn't take your parent telling you no.
It takes understanding why it's wrong to know why it's wrong. Children don't inherently understand that taking things is wrong. They do it to each other all the time.
I would agree, but I think you're dodging it there because honestly, yeah, a children doesn't know why it's wrong, but they know it's wrong. They get that gut feeling that they know what they're doing isn't right.
No, I didn't. I tried to steal something when I was very little. I didn't understand. I had no conception that it was wrong. And then I got caught and I got told why it was wrong.
You didn't have any bad feeling or remorse for doing it.
Once I understood what it was, but no.
I
Children
guess I can't
are
agree with you there.
children are notoriously remorseless. You have to teach them not to hit their brother and sister. They don't automatically understand that. You have to teach them, hey, your sibling is able to feel pain just like you. And children, when they're developing, they go through this process of understanding the theory of mind, which is understanding that there are other levels of consciousness. Other people understand different things.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very young children assume that everyone just knows what they know. They don't have a solid theory of mind, and they develop this. And parents are supposed to teach them that, the way you want to be treated, treat others that way, because that is consistent. That is not a contradictory or hypocritical standard to take. So it is an objectively viable moral standard. Kids who don't have parents often end up to be criminals and psychopaths because they don't have that guidance.
Oh, yes and no. I definitely get what you're getting at there. And yes, like my son, he hits his sister, and yes, I have to punish him for that. Now, and he has to learn that. So I would agree with that. Yet, from your position, what I'm getting at, I guess, is how do you actually come to that conclusion? Like you're saying it's objective, but to me that would be subjective. Just like you were saying with the Hitler thing, it's if there is no God, then what's the point of not doing these things? Because in the end, it's all about yourself anyway, right?
Well, can't you explain why hitting your sister is wrong?
Can I explain it?
Yeah, like if you're telling your child, at least if they're old enough to understand what you're saying, can't you explain why it's wrong? Or do you just say it's wrong, just obey me because I said so? Or do you try to explain to them and help them understand that there are reasons behind this ban on hitting your sister?
Well, yeah, I would agree with you, but again, I think that starts number one from the discipline. My son's not even talking yet, so for me to have this conversation per se, like you're trying to say, is not going to reach him. He's not going to understand why it's okay or not okay to do something, but he can go off the discipline he's receiving to understand. Okay, maybe I shouldn't do that until maybe he is old enough to where I can explain it to him.
Yeah, and
Does that make sense?
Yeah, but if you could explain it to them, that would be preferable. And those
Well, of
reasons,
course.
those reasons underlie the reason you're correcting them in the first place. And those reasons remain the same whether there's a God or not. You're still harming another person, which is an inconsistent standard if you don't want to be harmed yourself, whether there's a God or not. That doesn't change.
Right. And I don't want to sit here and bore the audience either over a conversation they've probably all heard 1,000 times, because I think we both know where this is going to go, because I'm going to ask you, why is it wrong? Again, why is that wrong? Just because hurting someone isn't something you'd want to do to yourself, it doesn't make it, without God's guidelines, you could do whatever you wanted.
Well, you can do whatever you want with God too.
I would agree. But there's consequences to doing those things with God. There is no consequence in your approach here, of everything being unguided. If there's no guidance there, which God gives us, God's guided us through everything. If there is no guidance, then nobody can tell you what to do. You are the master of your own universe, and if you wanted to go shoot somebody, you should be able to do that. Because again, it's not up to God to decide what's right or wrong. It's up to man to decide what's right and wrong.
Well, shooting someone is hypocritical whether there's a God or not, and God is guided by these principles of rationality and logic. So it's the same thing. You're just inserting God as a middleman who's at best just bringing us what he's figured out.
No,
but the principles,
why would it be
the
wrong to
principles don't
shoot somebody in
change.
the face?
It's the same whether there's a God or not, because it's hypocritical.
See, I can't agree with you, because you're stealing from God to try and make your point.
So what? Why is stealing from God wrong?
Well, that's my
Assuming
entire point.
God is good, we can assume that for a second. Why is it wrong to steal from God? Because he has a right to whatever you're stealing from.
Exactly, that's my point. But again,
so
you're
you have
getting
a
your
right.
standards from God and saying this is right, but you don't need God.
We can still have rights without a God. We can still say, okay, here's the system. We all have equal rights. You deserve the fruits of your labor. If someone takes that from you, they don't have the right to do that because that's not their labor. You don't need a God to say that.
But why, Snake? Why though? Again, from my position, God gave us these things to abide by, and we clearly still abide by those things.
But doesn't he have a reason to do that?
You're trying to say, that's like saying, well, the universe was created and we don't need God. Well, that's a statement. That's fine and well that you can believe that way, but it doesn't account for it.
God has a reason why disobeying him or whatever is bad.
Yes.
Now that reason is either logical or illogical. Right?
Okay.
So humans can come to those same reasons without a God.
So you lost me again. You're just saying that we can do it because we can.
Because it's the same reasoning. God is reasoning to this position. Theft is wrong. Okay, so there are reasons why that's true, logical reasons. Why would that change when there's not a God? We can still have logical reasons.
But
we still have access to reasoning. We can still reason the same way God does, the same way God says, okay, stealing is wrong because you don't have a right to that because you didn't earn that.
So
we can also say that.
So you believe logic is good, right?
We can also check our statements and recommendations about behavior against logic, just like God does.
So you believe logic is good, right?
It's correct,
It's correct.
and we generally, that's what we say is good in the English language.
Okay. So logic's good, but why would it not be okay to not think logically and do something outside of logic because it doesn't matter, right?
It's incorrect.
Well, it's incorrect to whose standard though?
Logic. It's just
Well, logic is something we use.
Mhm. So it either makes sense or it doesn't make sense, and things can make sense or not make sense, whether there's a God or not. And the way that I know that is because the God has to figure out whether it makes sense or not for himself. And sure, he probably knows it the second, he probably already knows it, assuming whatever, that he's omniscient.
Now, but
But he's still backing that up with reasons and justifications.
yes, God is. And just like God can justify everything because he's God, a human being could justify anything they want to because
So now you're
it would be
saying,
their mind. Like for you, for instance, you can justify not believing in God, but it doesn't make it right.
I can justify not believing in God because there's no reason to believe in God.
That's
So,
exactly my point, though, Snake. Do you see what I'm saying? That
oh, you said
you're justifying it.
God can justify anything because he's God. So are you saying that that statement sounds like you're saying that God could justify murder because of his position of power?
Well, number one, God doesn't murder. God created. So you don't murder something that you created. You destroy it. You know, if I create a table,
You can
I
murder your
don't.
children.
If I don't, if if I create a table, I don't murder that.
Well,
Right?
the table's not alive. If you created a human being like a child, you can murder that. If we're going into questions like sci-fi, if you created a fully thinking and feeling computer or robot, would you be justified in taking its life? I
So
wouldn't think
let's go
so.
back to what you just said, like creating a child. So yes, I would agree that I helped create my child. I helped bring them into the world, but I didn't create the human species. Does that make sense? I God's not giving birth to humans. See what I'm saying? He created them out of thin air. There's a big difference there.
Yeah,
While
so
I
that's
am
why
a
I
human,
say,
so is my son. My son is a human. So yes,
I don't care
we would
what
be on
kind
the
of,
same level. I would be on the same level as my son as being a human being. But when you're trying to compare God to a human, that's just not the same thing. Now, I understand you may feel that that would be murder, but it wouldn't be. I mean, again, you can take it into art. If you create something, it's your imagination, you created it. Now, if you don't like it, you have every justification after that to crumple it up, throw it away, burn it, whatever you want to do with it. And no one's going to second guess why you did that.
but if you're creating a mind, that's different from creating an object, an inanimate object. It doesn't matter what species it is, a mind is a mind. So that's why I gave the example of the artificial intelligence. If you created an intelligence that could think and feel, then you have a moral responsibility to it because you created a mind. We haven't done that yet, but that's a huge question in sci-fi. Or do we have a responsibility to, well, I mean, it started even back in Frankenstein. Does Dr. Frankenstein have a responsibility to his monster? Or can he just destroy it at his will? The monster is fully, he's his own person.
Yeah, but you're going back into you're putting it on a level of human being. So, like you were saying, the AI, right? Now, say you did create that AI, would you consider if you didn't want that AI anymore, would you consider that murder?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, it's a mind.
An artificial intelligence. So a computer program that's got computer chips, metal, and all these other things. You would consider that soulless thing murder.
I don't consider anything to have a soul, but if it had a sophisticated enough mind so that it was conscious, yeah. I mean,
Well, we
it
have
doesn't even
AI
have to be
right
that
now.
smart. It could be like at the level of a dog. We don't have any AI that's quite as smart as a dog, but
Yeah, but it's inanimate.
you can still murder a dog.
It's not living though either. Just like you were saying with the table,
But there's a mechanism
it's
that's
not
creating
living.
there's a mechanism that's creating a mind. So we have to respect moral agents that are minds, or else we're being hypocrites. So that brings me back to, you said God can justify anything because he's God. I don't think God can justify a contradiction. Do you think God can justify contradicting himself?
God doesn't contradict himself.
So he can't justify it.
Can't justify what?
Making a contradiction.
I think that's a pointless term you're trying to use. Like, I don't get. Do you want to elaborate on that? I don't get what you're getting at here.
So assuming you're saying God can't contradict himself or does not contradict himself because he's so perfect, that's because he knows that there's a problem with contradictions, right? Because he can't justify it. So he won't do it. Because it's wrong. It's incorrect to contradict yourself. So a perfect being would not contradict itself.
No, I don't believe that's what it is. I believe that
A perfect being
God,
would not make
well, hold on.
logical
Let me.
fallacies.
Can I talk? What I think it is God is the supreme being. You know, there's a. Have you ever looked up the word holy?
Yes.
God is holy. It's not that he can't do something or whatnot. It's just he is the epitome of what is right and wrong. This is how he lives. That is who he is. Again, if if you considered bleach, that's what bleach is. It doesn't turn into something else because it doesn't want to or wants to. That's just what it is. You know, I'm stubborn, and you're stubborn too. So even in that's a characteristic of us. You know, that's part of our characteristics. So, and for God, that's part of God's characteristic. He doesn't do these things, not just because he doesn't, not because he knows it's right or can't justify it, but that's not his character. That's not who he is.
So is his character just random? Or is there a set of logical reasons why his character is X, X, and Y? Is there a
In my
reason? Is there a
opinion,
reason why God has a certain character?
God is who he is. It's just what he is.
It's just random.
It's not random. Yeah,
So then there's a reason.
he's clearly characterized as such. He
You,
is this. He
you
even says,
can
"I am."
you can say God is defined as good, but the problem arises, okay, is that how good is used in the English language? Well, if God
Why
is
are
allowing slavery and commanding genocide, no, that's not how the word good is used in the English language. So we have to ask ourselves, okay, so what are the components of what we call good in the English language? Then we have to compare that to God. And is there a contradiction between that? Are those two usages the same usage? Obviously not, because the God of the Bible, if we're saying that's good, then good includes contradictions. because the God of the Bible contradicts himself and does all kinds of horrible things. Good in the common usage of the word does not include contradictions. So there's a conflict there.
No, Snake, I think there's a conflict with you, to be honest. And again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to you or anything of that nature. I think it's your lack of understanding or wanting to understand something. So therefore, you're just opting into that there is a contradiction. You're not trying to look at it reasonably to
That's false.
to conclude what the Bible's actually saying and why things are done in the Bible.
I would prefer that there were no contradictions in the Bible. That's what
And
I would want to believe. That's what I prefer. And yet, there they are. It's not my choice. I don't want there to be contradictions in the Bible. I just read them. And so that's what I believe.
so you'd agree though that you think there's contradictions in the Bible. So whereas I, and I'm sure a lot of other Christians, would say there are not contradictions in the Bible.
Right, because from my perspective, it's because you just consider the Bible true, and that's your starting point. So therefore, nothing can prove that the Bible is false because you just assume it's true. Period. End of story.
Well, see, no, that's not
I
period
want
end
it.
of the story.
I would like it to be true. I prefer it to be true, but I'm not going to sit there and say that it is true no matter what. I have to analyze whether or not it is true. Otherwise, I can't justify that I have a good reason to believe in it.
Oh, Snake, I'm gonna have to go ahead and call you out, man. You keep saying you want this to be that way, and you want to try this and that, but you know, clearly in this conversation, I've brought up some things and tried to explain them to you, yet you're not willing to even bend on it or consider the possibility. You know, you, we can bring the slavery thing up again. You keep saying that God is saying that you can, or that it's good to own slaves and everything, which it doesn't say in there, but that's what you want it to say. So you're going that route now.
Nope.
And again, with the murdering thing, again, I'm trying to explain to you that it's not on the same level. Again, it's like this AI thing. It's a bunch of computer chips and whatnot. So for somebody to say that I would murder an AI would just, to me, would be ridiculous. And you still feel that that is wrong. So, in my opinion, I don't think that's what you want. You want to believe what you want to believe, and that's fine. That's fine and good.
No,
And
it's not
I'm
fine,
not going to.
actually.
Well,
That's called a bias. It's an
well, we all
irrational
have bias. We all have bias. I already talked to you about that. We all have a worldview, and that worldview makes us feel a certain way. Now, as far as why I don't think there's a contradiction, it's not because I just believe in God. It's because I've read it. When people all the time when I speak to people on YouTube in the chats and whatnot, and they bring up a contradiction, it's because I look into it. I actually dig in and try and understand what the contradictions are. And like I said, I just did a video on this, but I try and find what the contradiction is and relay it to the context and objectively look at it, not just from my standpoint, but find out what's going on and get full understanding. And I'm sorry, Snake. I just feel that you just don't want to understand it.
Well, I went into it wanting to understand it, and That's just false on its face. Just because I want to believe something doesn't mean I believe it. There's plenty of things that I want to believe, but I don't believe it. I used to be a communist. I wanted to keep believing in communism. I wanted to keep being a communist. And I had a lot of emotional reasons, from as petty as I liked the symbol. I liked my hat with the little communist symbol on it. I thought it was cool. I didn't want to leave it. And yet the facts convinced me that it was wrong. I wanted to believe something, but I couldn't believe it anymore because of the facts. I try not to have biases. I'm not aware of any that I have, at least that I act on. Like, I will say, in the sense, my bias is I would rather there be a God. I prefer there to be a God. I don't believe it. But I don't have this bias in the sense that I don't have to fit information into a predetermined worldview. If you just decide that the Bible is true no matter what, you do have to go through all the information and try and jam it and fit it into that predetermined worldview. I don't have that overarching system that all new information must fit into. I take the new information as it comes, and I adjust my model of the world according to that. I don't have a fixed worldview at all. And I know that because it's changed constantly.
Well, like when we when we talk in our email, if we didn't have a bias, we would be flip flopping back and forth constantly. We would, because when something new would present itself, say in the evolution realm, even as believers, we would just flip flop and say, "Oh yeah, okay, well it can't be God." And then when something is refuted, we go, "Oh, okay, yeah, it is God." So
that's how science works. You're unbiased.
Well, now,
if you get information that indicates this, you go, okay.
That's not how science works now.
That's exactly how it works. If you get new information, you change what the theory is. That
No,
you have
I
to
would
be
agree.
open to that.
No, I would agree there that with new information changes things, but also our bias, though, when you view the evidence, it has a big effect on how we view that evidence. Ken Ham, I think he did a marvelous job during that Bill Nye debate. He brings this up that it's our bias, and again, there's nothing wrong with it. We all have it. It's something we can't deny or should deny. It's there. So when you, again, like if you were to look at fossils, from your worldview, you're going to look at it from that worldview and conclude to that.
No.
Now, from myself, I'm going to look at it as from a Christian view.
No, I look at the evidence and derive a view from that. I don't have a view and then make the evidence fit into that worldview. That's the difference.
I think you're just lying to yourself. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm not, and I've proven it because I went into the Bible wanting to believe the Bible. I went to a Christian school. I had my parents pay a lot of money so I could go to a Christian school and learn about religion. There, I became an atheist because I read the Bible, and the words in the Bible convinced me against what I wanted to be true. And I've done this for other things like political beliefs. If I just wanted to stay with what I wanted to be true, I'd still be like a hardcore Democrat or something. Instead, I have left the Democratic Party. Now I haven't joined the Republican Party, but I have shifted away from things that I wanted to be true because I'm willing to expose my mind to facts that contradict it, because I'm willing to change the way I see things according to new information.
So who guided you through when you read the Bible? Was it just you reading it, or did you have guidance?
I had guidance from a teacher.
Okay.
I had to pass tests. It was a Christian school.
Oh, so the school you went to, they made you read the Bible, and what was this college or?
Classes. It was high school. It was we had to take several classes on the Bible.
Okay, I'm not very familiar with was Catholic school. I assume.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I'm not really familiar with that. I went to public school, so I can't relate to it. I wouldn't. So, did they answer your questions, or was it a lack of getting answers that kind of veered you away as well?
It's about the same answers as I'm getting to current day on with the people I talk to on YouTube. I was actually my teacher really liked me because I asked a lot of questions,
Mm-hmm.
and but I got about the same answers as I'm getting to this day because Christian apologetics haven't really changed much, and they still have not really been able to convince many people who aren't already believers who have that bias. Like, unlike when a new model of math or science comes out, everyone in the whole world converts to that because it has very strict testable answers. No religion in the world has that, which is why no religion in the world has been able to convert all the other religions, because you just pretty much 99% believe what their parents taught them. The biggest predictor of what someone's religion is what region they're from.
I'm going to have to disagree again with you because it there's a lot of people even in here in the Staying for Truth team that didn't grow up with a religious background and still found God. And again, Ravi Zacharias is a great example. You know, he
A
he's from
statistical anomaly.
and well, it's not an anomaly. There's plenty there. No, there's Christians there too. So basing it off of just region, I think that's ridiculous. I mean, you could read the
Well, that's a
Bible.
fact. That's a
Hold on,
statistical fact.
hold on. You can read the Bible and see just in the Bible people from different regions um, learning to believe in God. You know, that's what the whole Christian movement was to go out and spread the good news. So just because you are living in a certain region doesn't mean that you can't believe in God or that God won't reach you. So I've got to disagree with you. It's no matter where you're from. I mean, there's in
So,
where Islam is really powerful, there's still Christians.
uh-huh.
You know, in China where it's actually illegal, there's still Christians.
So do you think that you're more likely to be a Muslim if you were raised by Muslim parents?
No, I believe that you would be whatever
Really?
you wanted to believe.
So how come almost all Muslims children raised Muslim continue to be Muslims? Because the Christians living in like Syria or something, those are Christian families. They're not just random people from Muslim families that are Christians. They're passing on their Christianity to their children, their entire communities, and the Muslims are passing their Islam to their children.
Okay,
And
yeah.
for the vast majority of them, they just stick with what was taught to them.
Well,
unlike science, which manages to convert people, the theory of evolution managed to convert nearly every single creationist in the world because everyone was a creationist at the time.
oh yes and no. Just because it was at that time doesn't mean that everyone was a creationist. And it doesn't believe that it doesn't mean that they all believed in God. There's obviously throughout history, there's a lot of people that didn't believe in God. So it's I just don't see how you have any validity in that point. And again, just because someone was raised up in a Muslim household or a Christian household or an atheist household, it doesn't define what they're going to be. Everyone has their own choice. And if someone decides to stay Muslim, once they reach a certain age, that's their own choice. It's not.
So how come 99% stay with what they were raised as?
Because it's their choice. If you want
But
to choose to stay,
why is
I
conversion
don't have that
so
answer
rare?
for you. I don't have that answer for you. Do you
Because
know
it's
the
not-
answer?
Because it's not convincing. That's why.
Because what's not convincing?
The arguments for each religion. So atheism is actually able to convert people at a much higher rate than any single religion, because it has convincing arguments. And the same thing, you see the same patterns in scientific discoveries. If we discover something, I don't know, Newton discovered calculus. People didn't have to they didn't stay in their ignorance of calculus. He had an argument and they saw it was true and they were convinced. So if you could do that with any religion, then it would spread in a similar manner to discoveries like mathematics.
It does, Snake.
It
Look
doesn't.
at
It's
how many-
primarily spreads through children or conquest, which I wouldn't count because that's forcing
I would
someone.
disagree, and you'd have to show me the facts on that because that's not true.
The Muslims would
everyone,
conquer.
hold on. Everyone can come to their own conclusions. Everyone can make up their own minds. You know, there's people that travel the world in the name of God and bring the good news to them. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world. You can become a Christian. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. You can become an atheist. That's what you're trying to say. Just to me, it's not holding any weight. It doesn't matter your location. You can be whatever you want to be. Obviously, you are. Were you raised in a Christian home?
Not really.
Well, you went to a Christian school, so I'm assuming, or a Catholic school, so I'm assuming it had some kind of relevance.
I was raised in a Christian culture.
Okay, but
America is a Christian culture.
Look, so you're just saying you're an exception to your own statistics because obviously you're Christian.
Atheism is an exception to the statistics because atheism converts people at a higher rate than any single religion does. That's why it's the fastest growing quote unquote religious group.
I wouldn't agree with you there. I think
because it's actually better at converting people than any single religion. So
as far as people leaving their faith, yeah, I would agree that a lot of people are leaving their faith.
Do you think Mormons have a good reasons when they go around converting people?
Do they have good reasons?
Yeah.
I don't know where you're going with that.
Like if someone
everyone would have anyone trying to do
Mormonism,
something like you trying to turn people into an atheist, you would consider that a good reason, right?
No.
No?
Just growing your group is not really a reason.
Okay, so you spreading the word of atheism, in your opinion, isn't good.
If it was just so I could have more people that were atheists, then that would be bad.
So you're pre-assuming that the Mormons are doing it just to grow their numbers?
Well, I do assume that, but that's not the point I was trying to make.
Well, I guess I needed to make that point because, again, it's how you're trying to take things and your viewpoint. Because, again, I just don't understand what you're saying. You're trying to make a point about a Mormon.
Do you think if someone converts to Mormonism that they've done so for good reasons, like for a valid logical reason? Or do you think that the Mormons have tricked them somehow? Like maybe they believe it. They're not actively trying to trick people, but they have given a bad reason that someone believes for a bad reason. Do you think Mormonism is justified in its... Do you think someone's justified in converting to Mormonism? Is that a smart decision? Is that a true decision?
That would be their own choice, would it not? Like, it's not up to me to justify.
I shouldn't
their
have called it a
actions.
decision because they're convinced.
Okay.
So they can be convinced for good reasons or they can be convinced for bad reasons. Do you think, okay, let's change it to Islam. Do you think someone would convert to Islam for good reasons or for bad reasons?
Okay. Let me just flip it to you as well, and we'll just use the word atheist. Can you answer that?
Well, would you answer my question that I asked you?
Again, I can't control what somebody else does. I'm not going to, I can't justify what other people are doing. Now, if you're talking about from um, my standpoint, as a Christian, I can only speak as a Christian. I can't speak for other religions, and I'm not going to.
But you're saying that your religion is true and the others are false because you're saying everyone who believes in the other religions are going to burn forever in hell.
No, I never said that. You're putting words in my mouth, Snake.
That's what the Christian religion says.
No, that's not what the Christian religion says.
So if you don't believe in Jesus, you can still go to heaven?
I didn't say that, but I don't pick and choose who goes where and what happens. That's not anyone's. That's not our job to do.
I know you don't.
Only God and Jesus do that.
You're saying that your religion is the true religion, so there are good reasons to believe in this religion, and if you believe in a different religion, you have bad reasons. It's not logical to believe in those religions. You're saying it's only logical to believe in your religion.
No, Snake, that's not what I'm saying.
So then why should
Again,
I believe you then?
You're putting words in my mouth.
Okay, so if you don't have good reasons to believe in Christianity, what are we even talking about?
I have plenty of good reasons for me and why I believe in Christianity. It's not my job to judge anyone, but that's what you're trying to push off on me. You're trying to push off like I'm judging everyone else in their religion and their thought process. That's not what I'm doing. I would say, if anything, that's what the atheists do. All they do is judge.
Because they don't want to believe in the wrong thing. So they see
Nobody wants to believe in the wrong thing.
Right. So they see logical errors in all these belief systems, and they want to point it out.
Point what out?
The errors that people are making when they are convinced by a religious argument. I want to point out how religious arguments are founded in logical fallacies or are just empty assertions.
Okay, can you come to a point now?
So, like I asked, if someone converts to Islam from Christianity, do you think that there was some valid reason that convinced them? Or do you think it was like some bad reason that convinced them?
Is somebody from Judaism?
Because if it's just what convinces you, I don't really care what convinces you. That's subjective. I want to know what is like an argument. What is an argument that is a good reason for anyone to believe?
To believe what?
Well, anything, any proposition should have a good argument behind it. So if you're going to convert to Islam, you should have a good argument for why you've done so, for why it's convincing, right?
I'd agree, and that would be up to that person to make that argument. Are you wanting me to argue for them?
It's not up to them whether it's a good reason or not, though. Someone can believe something for bad reasons, right?
Yeah, we've already been there. Yeah, we talked about that. Like I said, we could flip this to the atheists as well. You know, do you think it's good for you to turn other people into atheists while there's still a chance and you not knowing 100% that God doesn't exist? Do you think that you'd be doing a good thing by leading people away from God?
Yeah.
You think that would be a good thing?
I think there are good reasons to not believe in religions. And the main reason is because there aren't good reasons to believe in religions.
That literally made no sense, Snake. You said You said you need good reasons to not believe in religion, and there are good reasons, but you haven't given any reasons.
A good reason to not believe in something is if there are no good reasons to believe in it.
Well, and that would be subjective, though, right?
If there's
'Cause-
no good reason to believe in the reptilian humanoids that are controlling the world underground, then that's a good reason to believe that there aren't. That's a good reason to not believe it if there are no reasons to believe it.
But that would be subjective, right? You can believe in whatever you want. Nobody here or anywhere in the world can take away your justification for your belief, right?
Well, if the justification is bad, then you should try to take away, because you shouldn't believe things that have poor justifications, because you shouldn't believe things for subjective reasons. You should believe them for objective reasons, because subjectivity is useless.
I agree.
If you say that subjectivity is fine, then that opens the door again to the Nazis. Well, they believe it. So who are you to try and convert them away from it? Well, the Nazi ideology has bad reasoning behind it. So you should not believe in it.
Right, and that would be subjective.
No, that's objective.
God, no, what I'm saying is from the Hitler viewpoint, that would be subjective for them to believe that. Objectively,
It's subjective that they believe it, but it's not subjective that it's incorrect. It is
no, I would agree to that. And what I'm trying to say is the Christian religion and the way of life is objective. I didn't make those rules. I didn't make the commandments. I didn't set the tone of the scenery. I didn't do any of that, Snake. That was already in place.
So how do you know that?
How do I know what?
Some book says it. How do you know that those are the rules?
How do I know those are the rules?
Mm-hmm. You just presuppose that God exists and the God of the Bible is the
So
true
you're
God.
wanting, okay, so you're wanting are you wanting my reasons? Because right now you're just, I don't get what you're trying to get at. I can give you my reasons. I can't give you everyone else's reasons, Snake. I can give you my reasons why I believe in God. Is that what you want?
Well, no, I want a good reason. If your reasons are a good reason, then it's an objectively good reason for anyone to believe. And so I feel like we're getting a little bit off topic, but the point that I'm trying to make is that there are good reasons to believe things and there are bad reasons to believe things. And the same thing applies to moral statements. There are good reasons for a moral statement and there are bad reasons for another moral statement. If a moral statement has bad reasoning behind it, then it's an invalid moral statement. And I can point that out, whether there's a God or whether there's not a God, or whether there's multiple gods, or whether the universe was created by pixies. The arguments remain the same. Logic remains the same. The law of non-contradiction remains the same. God cannot be correct and still make a contradiction in one of his arguments. So his arguments, his justifications, must have good reasoning behind it. And we can test that.
Yes, we can. We can test that there are no contradictions in the Bible. I'm going to go ahead and just give you my logical reasons for believing in the Bible that you could also believe logically, and they're justified. Testimony is a justified reason to believe something. There are many testimonies in the Bible. You could go back to Moses parting the Red Sea. There was a lot of witnesses giving testimony to this happening. Every single account in the Bible has a testimony to why or what happened and for us to believe in. It's justified. There's still today testimonies of people, saying God's in their life. I can sit here and tell you when I pray and my prayers are answered, that's a testimony. I can attest to God's existence. I know that he's answering me. When a doctor says that something was a miracle because they couldn't save that person, they were supposed to die, that's a testimony. These are testimonies. So logically, I am very justified to believe in what I want to believe. Now, if you want a test, an actual test, Snake, to know if God exists, there is a way for you to test that. The Bible says to test these things. So what I would suggest you do to test this is to start praying. If you want to know God exists, start praying, ask for things, read,
I've done that.
was it 1 John, or I think it's 1 John.
I've done that.
No, it's James. In James chapter 4, I believe, where he talks about prayer. You know, if you're praying for things that I got to paraphrase because I don't have the verse on hand right now, but our prayers are not answered if those things take us away from God. So if you're praying for $1 million, for example, and that $1 million would take you away from God, and not be towards His will, because His will, we all know, is for us to be with Him. So if you were to pray for something that would take you away from God, it's not going to be answered. So if you start praying and test those things with knowing that, you could start testing those things. You could find out if God's there. You could have a relationship with God. You could read the Bible and ask for understanding.
I've already done that and it failed. And people of other religions tell me
Who
to
failed?
pray. Well, if there's a God, he failed.
So you won't take any kind of.
I failed to sense any sort of God when I prayed, and I know tons of people from other religions who say, if you pray, you will find my God. Everyone says that if I pray, I'll find their God, but it's all different gods. And I've prayed before, prayed earnestly, and I have not found a God. I didn't hear any voice. I didn't have any feeling. I didn't feel any grace. James 4 says, James 4 verse 3, when you ask, you do not receive, because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. I've never prayed for $1 million. I've never prayed for a car. I've specifically attempted prayer to the Christian God to know it, only if he is true, so that I know the truth, with no other motivation other than that. I can't think of a purer motivation than just to know the truth. I received no answer. And
wait, what do you mean by receive no answer? Are you saying you expected God to talk to you?
I don't
actually
know.
have
what
a
am I supposed to
conversation
look
with
for?
you?
What am I supposed to look for? You said pray and I'll know. Well, nothing happened. I don't.
Well, see,
my
that's
mind
what I'm
wasn't
saying.
changed.
What's your expectation of what's supposed to happen with prayer? That that would be.
I don't expect a physical voice to occur, although that would be nice.
Okay, so what are you expecting?
I don't expect anything. It's something that is beyond my understanding. But if it happened, I would now believe, and I don't believe. I don't know what I expected. I was praying to the God to show me something, and that's it. That's as far as I got. And people tell me that for all kinds of religions, and it does, and I've tried that too, and it doesn't work. And it's similar to the testimony. There are testimonies for. There are tons of testimonies for the miracle in the Quran. There are tons of testimonies for miracles today. People testify to miracles that gurus in India do, that they attribute to gods. Thousands of people say they have observed and testified to these miracles. That's for a different religion. So you'll discount that. You'll say that testimony is false. And I agree with you, but you make a special exception for testimony that lies in the Bible. People testify that Islam helped them overcome addictions, or Allah has helped them survive something that they shouldn't. But we all know that that testimony isn't true. Testimony can be flawed because testimony is the single worst form of evidence because someone's perspective can be wrong. People can believe and testify to false things that they truly believe, but it's not true. And like you said, I was praying to the Christian God, and I don't know what to expect. Maybe you can tell me what to expect, and I'll try it again.
Okay, yeah,
But
I would. Give me 1 second. I have to use the bathroom, man. It's been 2.5 hours. I don't know if you maybe need to use the bathroom, but I'm going to take one quick minute, everyone. And yes, I would like to go into that if you got the time. Do you got the time?
yeah, I've got a strong bladder.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, I don't want to talk too much without conflict here, but maybe I can at least provide some sort of reprieve from absolute silence. I know that when I cut out earlier, that probably was not the most entertaining thing. My connection seems strong now, so that's good. I think the Ethernet cable connection broke somehow, but I fixed it. I did notice something a little weird in the chat. Who said it? Well, someone said something about how it's good that God ordered the genocide of the Amalekites because they were abusing children, and it was better that those children just died. I think that shows a callous indifference for consequences. Because what if a different God is true? What if God's not true?
Okay.
Those kids died for nothing.
I don't know what you. I had my headphone, or I have headphones, so I don't know what you're saying. But
I was just trying to fill the dead air.
I appreciate it.
I was commenting on something. Someone said that it was good that God ordered the death of the Amalekites because the children just would go to heaven. And I was just pointing out how if you're actually wrong, then you've just killed those children for nothing. You haven't even given them the chance. And I think that shows a callous indifference for the consequences. Faithful, honest, and true said that. Not surprised.
I'm sorry. What did he say? How far up was it?
I think this was in the actual chat. This was at 5:17. Those pagans were murdering children. They deserved to be exterminated. The children that died went to heaven by default. Think about it. And I have thought about it, and I think that's a pretty brash assumption that you can just kill children and send them to heaven. That is a lack of accountability and a lack of consequences. You can do anything, and it's okay. They'll just go to heaven. I think that the atheist or just secular framework is much better because it at least tries to deal with consequences in the real world and doesn't make any assumptions beyond that.
Okay. I forgot what were we talking about, right? We were talking about prayer, right?
Yeah.
There was something else.
How's that going to work for me?
There was something else that I really wanted to. Oh, real quick though, when you say you've talked to other people in other religions, can you elaborate on that real quick for me, on what God you're speaking of?
Primarily Muslims and Hindus. I've told, and there's a lot of Hinduism is kind of a weird religion because it seems polytheistic, but they believe in kind of an all-encompassing God that is the creator of all the other gods. And they talk to me as if, most of them talk to me as if they just tell me God is real, like as if they're kind of talking about a similar but different type of God. And they say the same things, like if you just pray, God will let you know that he's real. And Muslims say that, but I've had Mormons tell me that. I don't know if I've actually had any Jews say that. Jews have been the rarest, in my opinion, but I've had multiple different Christian sects say that. But I've also had people in Hinduism and Islam say that.
Okay, the reason I was asking, that is, you do realize that the three major religions they all worship the same God. They just have different views, right? So Judaism, being a Christian is just coming off of Judaism, right? So it's the same God, and to me, honestly, the only thing that really separates the three major religions is who they believe Christ was. So in Judaism, they believe that Jesus was this horrible person, trying to proclaim something that he wasn't. Where Christianity, he was the propitiation for our sins, for God to make a way for us to be with him again instead of have, because without the tabernacle and all those other things, we couldn't be close to God. And this was a way for God to be able to, we got rid of all the sacrifices and all that kind of stuff because this was a way for God to be able to be with us and give us the free gift of grace to be forgiven. So, and the Muslims, they believe Jesus was a prophet, and I believe that they don't believe that he was on the cross. I believe that they believe he rode up into heaven. So when you talk about gods, I hope you realize that um, the majority of the world, like the entire world, believes in the same God, but they all have um, there's just different ways they believe in things. Catholics and even the Mormons, what you're talking about, that would be like saying Baptist. It's just another form of it, but it's the same God.
So if I pray to the God of Muhammad and I feel that he's answered, then that's leading me away from Jesus as the Son of God. And if I pray to the God of Abraham, it depends on what kind of God I'm conceiving of when I pray, unless he clarifies in his answer. If I'm praying to, like, in a Jewish context, I might be convinced that Jesus is not the Messiah if I receive some kind of answer. And if I pray to the Hindu God, I think that's Brahma, then I would be led away from the Judeo-Christian God altogether. And if I just pray to some generic God, if there's a God at all, which I've also tried, and I get no further information of, like, okay, is it Judaism? Is it Christianity? Is it Hinduism? Is it Shintoism?
Well, again, though, I think you're losing track of what you're taking the religion of somebody and not realizing it that most of them believe in the same God. It's the same God, no matter whose name you put in front of it, the God of Abraham or whatever you want to put in there. God is I am. That's who God is. So anyway, I just wanted to talk to you about that because I felt like there was some confusion there because again, yeah, you can believe a certain way about Jesus, but that doesn't that still wouldn't take away from God, the God, that billions, well, probably trillions. I haven't looked at the a poll or anything recently, but the three majors all it's the same God. It's not some random different God. So I just wanted to clarify that to you. And as far as the prayer now,
Well, if I could add,
Yeah, go ahead.
The Mormons also say something very similar. They say that the Book of Mormon, you can test this to be like an actual test,
Mm-hmm.
and they frame it like as a scientific foreshore test. You can pray on it whether the Book of Mormon is true, and you'll receive the answer. And some people report that they've gotten the answer back that yes, the Book of Mormon is true, and I would say probably most people would get the answer no. Well, I mean, they wouldn't get an answer. They would just not get an answer at all. I've tried it. I didn't get an answer saying whether the Book of Mormon was true, but I've gotten the same lack of answer for the Bible. And even if I got an answer, this isn't some kind of objective test because I can't show someone what happens in my mind. Even if I felt like I got an answer, there's no way to know what's going on there. I need to be able to objectively verify, preferably able to show other people the results of this test, and I can't do that with prayer.
Mm-hmm. No, you're going on about the Book of Mormon. I'm not here to defend the Book of Mormon or say that if you pray that you'll know that the Book of Mormon is true. That's not. I don't think anyone should be saying that. Period. I think when the Bible says to test these things is again it's testing what the Bible has to say to our reality, and as long as those things match up, which they do, it's a confirmation that you can take it at its word. Now, as far as the prayer, again, the prayer would be something personal for you. The very first, I see some of you in here in the chat here, and I'll get to that here in a minute of what if I need to clarify something. But as far as the prayer, again, it's something personal for you that you would have to speak with God. It is a personal relationship. You do have to build with God, and again, the one of the only ways you're going to know God is number one, you'd have to read the Bible and figure out His characteristics, and two, go off the testimonies, and three, have those conversations. So, in my very first episode, I mentioned hush. I mentioned a lady that worked with me, and she brought her some of her problems to me, and I told her I'd pray for her. And shortly after that, I think it was like a day or two later or something like that. I can't remember now, but that preacher or pastor came back to her to, I guess he addressed the whole church and re-explained what he was trying to say. And then her son also got a call for a job. So I took that as a way for my prayers being answered. Now, God didn't speak to me. He didn't come to me in a dream and say, Aaron, this is, this is your prayers have been answered. It's you just have to look and see what you've prayed for and see if those things happen. And in the Bible, it tells us, especially as a group, when we pray, that these things will happen, and to pray that like they already did happen. So I'm sure anyone here in the audience also can also attest. If you've ever been to church and you've prayed for someone's healing or prayed for something, and then it happens. And in some cases, it's just it's just horrible. The instances are horrible. there's just really no hope for the person, and they're on the decline, and then the church starts praying, and they make a full recovery, and in some cases, even like a cancer or something, that is completely wiped out. So I think in something else that we have to remember in prayer is it's what God wills. So, and if our prayer isn't in God's will, and if it's not, and again, that's right off the bat, if we're praying for something for our own selfishness, it's not going to come true. And again, if it's going to lead us away from God, then it's not going to come true. So I would say a good way is maybe at least when you first start out, don't even pray for yourself on something to be fixed. If you talk to somebody and you notice that they have something going on in their life that's hard, pray for them, and let that help lead you. And I'm not here to say every single time I pray that that I get an answer, or even right away. It doesn't work like that. And I don't know. Again, I think what you expect out of things. Maybe it's just not demanding. What's the word I'm looking for? But unreasonable, I guess, is the word I'm looking for. It's what, like you were saying, you wanted to hear a voice or something like that. Well, if you look at the Bible, only certain people got to talk to God, and I know personally, in my opinion, I'm nowhere near as righteous as Moses was.
Well, what I respect or expect is a reliable methodology. So I don't think any of that is a good reason to believe, because Muslims and Hindus tell me the exact same thing. They tell me they pray and their relative was healed. They prayed and their their problem was solved. And I don't believe them, and you don't believe them, because things just happen. Things sometimes just work out, and everyone of every faith prays for these things, and it happens for every faith. So there's no way to show that it was an answered prayer, and there's no way to show which God answered that prayer. And if I use that same method for different faiths, I can come to any faith. I can just, if I pray and something happens to work out, if I pray to Thor, then you're saying that I'm justified to believe in Thor. And I don't think that you can say that.
I didn't say that ever.
Well, if you're saying that if I pray for things and they work out, if I've prayed to the Christian God, then that's a reason to believe in the Christian God. So if I do the same thing for a different God, which millions of people do, then I'm justified to believe in those gods. So it's an inconsistent methodology that gives us unreliable results. And you mentioned that if the Bible lines up to reality, then it's true. Well, going back again, the Bible says slavery and genocide are permissible, and yet we know it is not. So that's one reason that I am pretty sure that the Bible is not true. And like with the justification for genocide that we've heard, is that it's okay to just, kill the parents and kill the children, because the children are going to heaven by default. Well, who's to say that it's wrong to have an abortion then? If the babies just go to heaven by default if you kill them, then you're just not accountable for your actions at all, because you can pin anything on this belief in prayer, and you can just get forgiveness for anything, and there's no consequences to any of your actions. So I don't see any reliable methodology going on here. That doesn't mean I won't try it, because I could be wrong. Of course I'll try it. But
I would, man. I'd appreciate it. I get what you're saying. I really do. And as far as the killings and stuff, I do want to hop on that topic right after this. if you have the time. But um, you keep bringing up everyone else. I'm not asking you to believe everyone else, and I don't think anyone in this chat is wanting you to believe everyone else. What we would be trying to tell you is believe in God and believe in His words. So reading the Bible and praying is a way to connect with God. Okay, that's so. I'm not, again, people can give testimonies, and that's a perfectly justified uh, way to believe something. I mean, you can't take that from me, Snake. I don't care what you say. That's it. That is a justification. It's logically justified for me to do that. Now, what I'm asking you is, and like the Bible says, I can't bring you to God. I'm only a conduit. Only only God and Jesus can bring you to that conclusion. There's nothing I can say or do that's going to take you there. My recommendation is I would request that you read the book of Matthew, and before you start reading, pray to God to give you uh, wisdom, guidance, and understanding while reading it. And again, you would have to be sincere. You'd have to honestly, you know, put all this stuff, whatever you're talking about, you'd have to take that out of your head and honestly say, okay, God, I'm going to try. I want to see this through, and let's figure this out. So that's what I'm going to request from you to do, um, and I hope everyone here in attendance would also pray for Snake as he goes through this, and hopefully, um, hopefully he comes to a conclusion and has a good relationship with God. Um, Now, as far as the killings of children and all this, I've had many discussions on this. Um, so, as far as, are you talking about when uh, God had the Israelites go in and kill everyone? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. I'd like to address first though that I know you don't want me to test this for the other religions. I know you want me to just believe your religion, but I have to be able to see if this method works outside of this narrow parameters. I have to be able to have a control group. If I'm going to run this like an experiment, I have to be able to rule out any bias. So I have to run the same method for, preferably as many gods as I can. And if one of those religions was true, I shouldn't get the same results for all religion, and yet I'm seeing reports of the same results for all religions. So I'm skeptical. I have tried praying before. I'll try it again. It's
Awesome.
I don't find it hard to put away my presuppositions or whatever you want to call them. Because that's part of argumentation, is you want to try and steelman the opponent. You want to suppose, okay, if this is true, then I should expect this or whatever. I don't foresee a problem in entertaining the possibility, is what I'm saying.
Good. Awesome. That's all I'm asking. Yeah, I'm not asking you to take anyone else's what they're saying, this or that happened. I want you to experience it, and the only way you're going to experience that is by doing this. And hopefully, here soon, maybe we'll call you brother in here, and that'd be awesome. And that would be, to me, I'd praise God for that, and I think everyone here would as well, because in the end, it's that's what it's about, is bringing people to God. And you're free to have your doubts and your skepticism on everything, but I'm not asking you about other religions or other scenarios or anything like that. I'm asking you a specific thing to try, and I really do hope you do, and um, and be sincere in it. So
Yeah, I just think if it was that easy, Christianity would already be the one sole religion. But
well,
I'll give it a shot.
that's a different
Again,
topic altogether, man. That's a hard issue. That's, to me, that's, you know, that's, you could say that about it. Even being an atheist, it's a hard issue in my opinion. Why people are not coming to God. There's plenty of people that don't believe in God just because they don't want to leave sin. And I think a lot of people don't look at the word sin the correct way. To sin is means to fail God, and that's the old Hebrew uh, meaning of sin is to fail God. So if we were to not follow God in something that He wants, then we fail Him. Does that make sense?
sure. I would just say if I wanted to sin, I would be a Christian because I would just get instant forgiveness. But I don't want to do bad things, so and
Well,
figure out why I shouldn't do it. Independent of any religious assumptions, I think you can still figure that out.
yeah, but I want to clarify something too. You're saying if you wanted to sin, you would be a Christian. That's not the point of being a Christian. Is to sin freely. Yes, that's definitely not it. There's plenty of scripture to back that up. It's not about having a free pass to sin. It's to grow in God. So I don't know who you've been talking to, or if that's just the way you interpret it, but I can guarantee you that's not what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, but if I wanted, if I knew that I was going to fail, and I wanted a way out, that's what Christianity is about. It's about
Again,
getting forgiveness for your sins, and maybe you disagree with a lot of Christians, but many of them tell me it's literally a way out of your sin because you are condemned as a sinner, and Jesus is offering you a free get out of. Well,
get
I
out of
use the
jail
term
free.
"get out of jail free card," but they say it's a way to get out of judgment.
Okay. Well, I guess what I would say to that is, yes, being a Christian and believing in Jesus, and obviously the scriptures say that those who call on Jesus, believe in Jesus, will be saved. Now, that would be the quote unquote get out of jail free card. It'd also be like jumping out of a airplane with a parachute. Now, we we are born into sin, um, and the in the Christian belief, Christ was the only person to not sin, and that's why he was the lamb, the perfect lamb. And again, grace is given as a gift. It's not something we can attain. So um, while we shouldn't try to sin, we shouldn't be trying to um, make uh, make problems. We should be trying to listen to the Word of God, especially the Psalms. About wisdom and patience and all these things to become better people. That's what Christianity is about, or even uh, what it should be about. Now, if people are just telling you, yeah, this is an excuse for me to go drink tonight and be forgiven, well, then that's the wrong mentality, and that's the wrong heart to have towards it. The whole point of all of this is for us all to love each other, and that means to love everyone. That was I said this the other day, that the two most important commandments is to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and strength, and the second one is to love others as you love yourself. So if everyone did that, Snake, then what's left to sin? There would be no reason to sin, because if you love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, you wouldn't want to fail him. You'd want to please him. You wouldn't do anything to fail God. And if you loved everyone, like, say, who's someone you love, Snake, like would never want to hurt?
I mean, lots of people, my family, friends.
Okay, so if you treated everyone like um, one of your family members that you love, adore, and cherish, um, you wouldn't ever say a harmful word towards them. You definitely wouldn't want to attack them and physically harm them. You wouldn't want to fail them in any way and
Yeah,
intentionally hurt them. You know what I mean?
that's why I think the concept of hell is very hateful.
Well, we can get on. I mean, that maybe that's a topic for another day. I think hell. I mean, we could go into. That's a huge
I
talk
mean,
as well.
it is part of the problem of evil, but we are running a little long. But I'm
Yeah,
not.
we're
I'm
going
not
on 3
saying
hours. Holy
it's.
cow!
I'm not saying that it's a free pass to sin, but that I would have reassurance that my sins would be forgiven, and I would feel less responsibility than I currently do to try and get things right.
Well, I think. I think again that's probably just um, a lack of knowledge in it, because if anything, it's more responsibility once you become a Christian. You have to, Jesus said we have to carry the cross. We have to, we have to pull our own weight. Sometimes it's a burden. So it's about trying to be better, and it's again, it's not about just being careless after the fact and expecting God to do everything for you. That's not what it's about. So anyway, we I did want to touch on real quick on the what were we talking about,
The genocides.
the people being taken out, children included. Um, again, just because of time right now, I'm going to try and make this short and sweet. If we look at a judge, when a judge issues a warrant, there's a reason for that warrant. That person has done something that they're not supposed to, whether it be murder or whatever the case may be. And if you know the history of those people, they had always been a enemy of the Israelites, and also, and obviously, an enemy of God. They knew God to exist. They still fought God. They raised their children up that way. They um, they did all these things. So when God issued a warrant, so we're taking we need to input the word judge here. So there's a warrant issued. You wouldn't call that judge a bad person. Especially in the Wild West, they used to issue dead or alive warrants for something as simple as stealing a horse. Now, people wouldn't go around saying that judge was a bad person for being for issuing justice. And I think the biggest thing is people try and confuse the two. Well, God is loving, he also has to be just. And if people are not going to love God and respect God, and especially if they make themselves an enemy of God, then God is then not just loving, he is just. And while even as parents, we love our children, but when they do something wrong, we punish them for it because we have to be just as well. So, in my opinion, this wasn't a genocide or anything like that. This was a warrant issued to bring justice to a people that, from the start, attacked the very end of the Hebrews when they were coming out of Egypt, and continued to make war with them and continue to be an enemy of God. And I don't care who you are. That would be like another country warring with the United States, and we come in there and wipe them out, because of their actions. So I'm not here to sit here and blow smoke up your butt. Um, that's how I view it. I hope others would agree as well that um, it's not about genocide. And again, going back to the AI thing, it's not. God cannot murder one of us because we're not on the same level as God. We don't consider. Again, I would not consider something, even with an artificial intelligence that's made of uh, computer chips and whatnot, if I were to dismantle it and even throw it in the fire, I did not murder that thing. And with that, I did tell you I would give you the last word, so I'll let you wrap us up, man.
All right. Well, I mean, I would say if God was all about love, he could settle things peacefully instead of ordering the deaths of men, women, and children. We can argue about that because I know you're not going to agree with that. We can argue about that at a different time if you want. But I think God needs to, if he has a acceptable moral code, he needs to have morals that are consistent and logical and not contradictory. And I think a genocide is contradictory, especially if he's God. He can literally just come down and give them the argument that would convince them to stop being violent towards one another. A God would know exactly what would convince everyone. And well, that's about it. I think that the Bible has a lot of instances of a God either showing that he has a lack of omnipotence or a lack of omniscience, and it shows him doing things that are illogical for someone of his power, and that are self-contradictory in and of themselves. And so I say that is how I judge whether something is evil or not, and that meets my criteria of evil, and so that's why I call a God evil, along with hell. But we can cover that at a different time if you want to. But thanks for having me on. I always enjoy these discussions. Maybe I'll read Matthew on air. Maybe that'll be boring, but I can try that experiment for you.
All right, buddy. Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think that's it. Thanks
All
for
right.
having me on again.
No, I appreciate it, and I also wanted to apologize too. Uh, I did get a little bit riled up, especially towards the beginning. So I do want to apologize in my frustrations. I try and set I want to set a good example for other Christians, and that was probably the wrong way to react. So I do want to apologize to you in that. Um,
Well, thanks. I mean, I don't take any offense. These are frustrating and complex questions, so
and
it's tough.
they can be, but I do appreciate you coming on. While obviously neither one of us changed each other's minds, I think that hopefully some of the audience had some a good time, and we're able to learn something um, from both sides, as you could see even in here earlier. Some people said that you had some good points. So that's I think this is what it's about, man. Is just instead of we've got to come to terms and be reasonable about things, and sometimes that means accepting things that go against our worldview, and um, also treating each other with respect, and not the way that uh, not the way that obviously gets all the views, where people are just talking complete smack to each other and being disrespectful. That doesn't get anyone anywhere. It may get views and responses, but I think there's a better way to go about it. And in the end, we're all human and should treat each other with respect.
Yeah, I think it's all about being reasonable and talking things out and not trying to bash each other over the head with a club to win.
Yeah, exactly. And I do appreciate you've been awesome. You didn't resort to um, name calling and so forth. So uh, that's awesome. I appreciate that.
I try. Well, thanks for having me on, and I guess we'll talk soon.
All right, buddy. You have a good one.
You too.
Bye.